The abandoned gas station on Highway 9 had been Maya's home for 3 weeks. Cold concrete, broken windows, and the constant fear that Marcus would find her. She'd fled with nothing but the clothes on her back and bruises that told the story of 5 years in hell. The German shepherd appeared on a Tuesday, limping and desperate, with a blood-stained collar and a note zip-tied to his neck. "If you're reading this, they killed me. Protect Emma. Trust no one. Agent Sarah Chen." Maya's hands shook as she read it again. She thought she'd left the violence behind when she quit the Hells Angels 10 years ago, when she traded leather and loyalty for what she thought would be a normal life. But normal had turned into nightmare, and now this dog was pulling her back into a world where bullets solved problems. The question wasn't whether she could save this Emma, whoever she was. The question was whether Maya still remembered how to kill before being killed. The shepherd whimpered, favoring his left hind leg as he collapsed beside her makeshift bedroll. Maya crouched down, her fingers finding the source of the limp, a shallow graze along his hip, the fur matted with dried blood. Not fatal, but enough to slow him down. Someone had been shooting at this dog, and considering the note, they'd probably succeeded with his owner. "Easy, boy," she whispered, her voice rusty from days of silence. The dog's dark eyes fixed on hers, intelligent and desperate. She'd seen that look before, in her own reflection 3 weeks ago when she'd finally worked up the courage to run. Maya carefully untied the note, studying it in the pale afternoon light filtering through the broken windows. The handwriting was precise, feminine. Agent Sarah Chen, federal agent most likely, which meant this wasn't some domestic dispute or gang retaliation. This was bigger, messier, the kind of thing that left bodies in shallow graves and witnesses in protective custody, or dead. She folded the note and tucked it into her jacket pocket. The smart move would be to cut the dog loose, let him find his own way. She had enough problems without inheriting someone else's death sentence. Marcus was still out there, still hunting. Adding federal agents and dead cops to the mix was suicide. But the dog's eyes held her, and something twisted in her chest. When was the last time anything had depended on her? When was the last time she'd mattered to anyone except as a target for Marcus's fists? "Emma," she said aloud, testing the name. Could be a daughter, sister, maybe another agent. Could be anyone. "Where's Emma, boy?" The shepherd's ears perked up at the name. He struggled to his feet, took a tentative step toward the door, then looked back at her expectantly. Maya laughed, short and bitter. "You want me to follow you? Into God knows what kind of mess?" The dog limped another step, whined softly. The rational part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive through 5 years of Marcus's escalating violence, screamed warnings. She was homeless, broke, and already running from one dangerous man. Getting involved with whatever had killed a federal agent was beyond stupid. But the other part of her brain, the part that remembered the weight of A45 in her hand and the respect in men's voices when they said her road name, that part was already calculating. If Agent Chen was dead and this Emma was in danger, it meant loose ends. It meant whoever killed Chen would be looking for anyone connected to her, including mysterious women who found her dog. Maya was already involved whether she liked it or not. She grabbed her backpack. Everything she owned fit inside, and slung it over her shoulder. "All right, boy, but if this gets us both killed, I'm blaming you." The shepherd's tail attempted a wag as he limped toward the door. Maya followed, pausing at the threshold to scan the empty highway. No cars, no movement except the wind pushing tumbleweeds across the cracked asphalt. But that didn't mean they weren't being watched. Her fingers unconsciously traced the scar along her left forearm, a souvenir from her Hells Angels days. She told herself that life was over, that Maya Reza Santos had died the day she walked away from the club. But scars didn't fade, and neither did muscle memory. Some skills you never really lost. The dog started down the highway, moving at a pace that accommodated both his injury and her need for caution. Maya kept to the shoulder, ready to dive for cover if she heard engines. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and she wondered how long they'd be walking, how much time they had before whoever killed Agent Chen realized her dog had found help. Emma better be worth this, Maya muttered, but she kept walking. Behind them, the abandoned gas station grew smaller in the distance. Ahead lay answers, danger, and possibly the chance to matter again. The dog's amber eyes tracked every movement as Sarah unlocked her apartment door. She'd lived in this converted warehouse for 8 months now, choosing it precisely because it had 3 separate exits and windows that faced different directions. Old habits from a life she'd tried to forget. "Come on, then," she whispered, holding the door open. The shepherd mix hesitated at the threshold, nose twitching as it scanned the sparse interior. Sarah understood that caution. Trust didn't come easily when you'd learned the world could turn violent without warning. Her apartment was deliberately minimal. A mattress on the floor, a small table, 2 chairs, and a hot plate. Everything she owned could fit in a single duffel bag. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, back when Marcus had burned everything she'd left behind after her first escape attempt. The memory sent familiar ice through her veins. The dog finally stepped inside, padding across the concrete floor with surprising grace despite the limp favoring its left hind leg. Sarah locked the 3 deadbolts she'd installed herself, then turned to study her unexpected guest properly under the harsh fluorescent light. Someone had hurt this animal, recently. Dark stains matted the fur around its neck, and now she could see the careful way it held its ribs, but its eyes remained alert, intelligent, watchful in a way that reminded her of the women at the shelter, always calculating escape routes, always listening for footsteps that moved wrong. "Let's see what this note says," she murmured, kneeling slowly. The dog allowed her to approach, though every muscle remained coiled. Her fingers found the small plastic tube taped beneath its collar, twisted it free. Inside was a single piece of paper, rolled tight. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it. The handwriting was feminine, hurried. "If you're reading this, they found me. Ranger knows the way. Follow him to locker 247 at Union Station. Inside, everything you need to know about Operation Blackwater. Trust no one in law enforcement. They're all compromised. The only person who can help is Elena Vasquez. She'll know what to do. Ranger won't let you down. Please don't let him down either. M." Sarah's blood turned to slush. Operation Blackwater. She knew that name. Had heard it whispered in the clubhouse years ago when she was still Maria Santos, when her cut bore the Hells Angels patch and her world revolved around loyalty, territory, and the kind of violence that made headlines. Blackwater was supposed to be buried, dead and gone with the rest of that life. Her phone buzzed against the table, the sound sharp in the silence. Sarah stared at it, every instinct screaming danger. Nobody called this number. Nobody even knew this number except her contact at the women's shelter and her landlord. The caller ID showed a local number she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, she answered but didn't speak. "Maria Santos." The voice was male, smooth as aged whiskey. "We know you have something that belongs to us." Sarah's free hand instinctively moved to the scar along her ribs, a permanent reminder of the last time someone had tracked her down. Wrong number. The dog, Maria. "And whatever our friend left for you to find." A pause. "We can do this easy or we can do this hard. Your choice." She ended the call and immediately pulled the battery from the phone, muscle memory taking over. How had they found her so fast? How did they even know she existed? Ranger whined softly, pressing his warm bulk against her leg. When she looked down, he was staring at the door with hackles raised. Sarah strained to listen and caught it, the almost inaudible whisper of footsteps in the hallway outside. They were already here. Sarah's mind raced through options. The fire escape led to a 15-foot drop into an alley that dead-ended at a chain-link fence. The basement exit required passing the building's main entrance. The roof access was 3 flights up with nowhere to go once you got there. She was trapped, and they both knew it. Moving silently, she grabbed her go-bag from beneath the mattress and slung it over her shoulder. The footsteps had stopped directly outside her door. Sarah counted shadows beneath the crack, at least 3 sets of feet. Ranger moved to her side without being called, those intelligent eyes fixed on her face, waiting for direction, trusting her to know what came next. The first lock picked with professional efficiency, then the second. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the familiar cold settle in her chest. She'd spent 3 years running from her past, building a life where violence couldn't touch her, where she answered to no one and hurt no one in return. But some things, once learned, lived in your bones forever. The third lock gave way with a soft click. Sarah Santos opened her eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, Maria Santos smiled. The morning sun cast long shadows across Maya's small kitchen as she watched the dog inhale his second bowl of kibble. She'd made an early run to the pet store, paying cash and keeping her hood up despite the clerk's friendly attempts at conversation. Old habits died hard. The note lay spread on her kitchen table, the edges still damp from where she'd tried to steam it flat after last night's rain. If you found Rex, I'm probably dead. Trust no one. Cabin 47, Pine Ridge Campground. Sarah needs help. The handwriting was feminine, rushed, desperate. Maya had spent the sleepless hours until dawn weighing her options. Walking away was the smart choice, the safe choice. She'd built this quiet life brick by careful brick, and getting involved in someone else's mess could bring it all crashing down. But the plea in those hastily scrawled words kept echoing in her mind, mixing with memories of her own desperate moments when no one had come to help. Rex finished eating and sat at her feet, those intelligent brown eyes fixed on her face. There was something almost human in his gaze, an urgency that made her stomach tighten. Animals knew things people missed. They sensed danger, desperation, death. Your owner's in trouble, isn't she, boy? His tail gave a single thump against the linoleum. Maya pulled up Pine Ridge Campground on her laptop. 2 hours north, nestled in dense forest that would provide plenty of cover, for camping or for hiding. The website showed rustic cabins scattered among towering pines, the kind of place people went to disappear for a weekend, or longer. She closed the laptop and stared at her reflection in the black screen. The woman looking back had worry lines that hadn't been there 5 years ago, premature silver threading through dark hair. She kept short and unremarkable. But underneath the careful camouflage of suburban normalcy, she could still see traces of who she used to be. The woman who'd ridden with the serpents, who'd known how to handle herself when things got ugly. That woman might be useful today. Maya stood and walked to her bedroom closet, pushing aside the sensible clothes she wore to her bookkeeping job. Her fingers found the shoebox hidden behind winter coats she rarely needed in this climate. Inside, wrapped in an old bandana, was the .38 special she'd sworn she'd never touch again. The metal felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like greeting an old enemy. She checked the cylinder, still loaded after all these years. Her hands remembered the weight, the balance, muscle memory overriding 5 years of peaceful domesticity. "This is stupid," she muttered. But she was already moving, gathering supplies with the methodical precision her old life had demanded. Bottled water, energy bars, first aid kit, cash from her emergency stash. The gun went into a jacket pocket, a cold weight against her ribs. Rex watched her preparations with growing excitement, his tail beating a steady rhythm against the floor. When she picked up his leash, he bounded toward the door like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. The drive north took them through increasingly sparse suburbs that eventually gave way to farmland and forest. Maya kept checking her mirrors out of habit, looking for tails that probably weren't there. Rex rode shotgun, his nose pressed to the window, alert and focused in a way that made her wonder about his training. Not many dogs maintained that level of concentration for 2 hours. Pine Ridge Campground appeared around a bend in the mountain road, a wooden sign marking the entrance to a maze of dirt paths winding between the trees. Maya parked near the main office and studied the layout. Cabins were numbered and scattered throughout the property, some visible from the road, others hidden deep in the woods. Cabin 47 sat at the end of a narrow track that disappeared into shadows between massive pine trunks. Smart location for someone who didn't want to be found, or for someone who wanted to control who found them. Maya cut the engine and sat listening to the forest sounds filtering through her windows. Birds, wind in the branches, the distant hum of traffic on the main road. Normal sounds, but her instincts, rusty from disuse but still functional, whispered warnings she couldn't quite define. Rex whined softly, his eyes fixed on the path leading to cabin 47. "I know, boy. I feel it too." She checked the gun one more time, made sure her phone had signal, and opened the car door. Whatever waited in those woods, she was committed now. The woman who'd spent 5 years hiding was about to meet whatever remained of the woman who used to know how to fight. The path to cabin 47 stretched ahead like a tunnel through green darkness, and Maya took the first step back into a world she'd hoped never to see again. The dog's amber eyes never left mine as I crouched beside him, Marcus's note trembling between my fingers. The words blurred together as my mind raced. Federal witness, they found me, trust no one. Every survival instinct I'd honed over the past 3 years screamed at me to run, to grab my go-bag and disappear before whoever was hunting Marcus came looking for his dog. But the German shepherd whined softly, pressing his massive head against my thigh, and something in that simple gesture anchored me to the spot. When was the last time anything had sought comfort from me? When had I been someone's safe harbor instead of the one desperately seeking shelter? I folded the note and slipped it into my jacket pocket, my fingers automatically checking for the switchblade I always carried. "Okay, boy," I whispered, running my hand through his coarse fur. "Let's figure this out together." The first step was getting him inside without attracting attention. Mrs. Chen from 3 Billions had a habit of peering through her peephole at the slightest sound, and the last thing I needed was questions about why I suddenly had a 100-pound dog. I guided him up the back stairs, grateful that his training kept him silent and alert. My apartment felt impossibly small with him in it. He immediately began a systematic sweep of the space, nose to the ground, checking every corner and shadow. Professional behavior. This wasn't just Marcus's pet. This dog had been trained for protection work, maybe even tactical operations. While he explored, I pulled out my laptop and stared at the blank search bar. 3 years ago, I would have had a dozen contacts I could call for information about a missing federal witness. The serpents had connections everywhere. Dirty cops, courthouse clerks, defense attorneys who walked the line between legal and criminal. But that network had died the night I fled, along with the woman I used to be. I typed Marcus's name into a basic search, knowing it was probably futile. Federal witnesses didn't exactly maintain social media profiles, but sometimes people got careless, and desperation made you grasp at any thread. The first few results were useless. A realtor in Ohio, a college student's LinkedIn profile, an obituary from 2019, but buried on the 3rd page, I found something that made my blood run cold. A news article from 6 months ago about a botched DEA operation in the Southwest. 3 agents dead, millions in seized drugs mysteriously vanished from evidence, and one key witness who disappeared before he could testify. The witness wasn't named, but the details fit. The dog's expensive training, Marcus's obvious desperation, the careful way he'd chosen someone living off the grid to trust with his most precious possession. A sharp bark made me look up. The German shepherd stood rigid by my front window, hackles raised, staring down at the street below. I killed the laptop screen and crept to the edge of the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. 2 black SUVs had pulled up across the street. Wrong neighborhood for that kind of money, wrong time of day for legitimate business. As I watched, 4 men climbed out, their movements coordinated and purposeful. They weren't trying to be subtle. They wanted to be seen, wanted whoever they were hunting to know the net was closing. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We know you have something that belongs to us. Make this easy on yourself." The dog growled low in his throat, a sound that raised every hair on my arms. These weren't cops or federal agents. Law enforcement would have come with warrants and backup units, not cryptic text messages and unmarked vehicles. I grabbed my go-bag from the bedroom closet, muscle memory taking over as I ran through my escape checklist. Cash, fake ID, clean phone, enough supplies for 3 days on the road. But as I reached for the door, the German shepherd blocked my path, sitting squarely between me and the exit. "Move," I hissed, but he didn't budge. Those intelligent amber eyes held mine, and I swear I could read the message in them as clearly as if he'd spoken. "You can't outrun this. Marcus couldn't, and neither can you." The rational part of my mind knew he was right. If these people had found me this quickly, they had resources that made running pointless. They'd track me down within hours, and next time they might not bother with polite text messages. But the alternative was staying and fighting, and I hadn't survived this long by picking battles I couldn't win. Whoever was hunting Marcus had enough power to make federal witnesses disappear and enough reach to track down anyone who helped them. I was one woman with a knife and a 3-year-old fake identity. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor, and he tilted his head toward the back of my apartment, not toward the fire escape, toward the storage room where I kept my old life carefully buried in a waterproof case. My hands shook as I realized what he was suggesting. There was only one version of myself that might survive what was coming, and she was someone I'd sworn never to become again. The warehouse smelled of rust and abandonment, but Maya's trained eye caught details others would miss. Fresh tire tracks in the dust, cigarette butts that weren't yellowed with age, and the faint scent of coffee beneath the decay. Someone had been here recently. Someone might still be here. Diesel pressed against her leg, his earlier playfulness replaced by alert tension. The dog's instincts mirrored her own as they moved deeper into the cavernous space, their footsteps echoing despite her attempts at stealth. "Sarah Chen!" Maya called out, her voice carrying across the empty expanse. "I have your dog!" Silence stretched between the rusted machinery and broken windows, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic from the highway. Maya counted to 30, then tried again. The note in Diesel's collar brought me here. "If you're hiding, I understand. I know what it's like to run." A sound from the upper level, metal scraping against concrete. Maya's hand instinctively moved to her waistband, where she'd once carried protection, finding only empty space. 3 years of peaceful anonymity had made her soft, unprepared for whatever game she'd stumbled into. "Please," came a voice from above, thin and desperate. "Don't hurt me." Maya looked up to see a figure emerging from behind a stack of crates on the mezzanine level. Even from this distance, she could see the woman was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She descended the metal stairs slowly, hands visible, eyes darting between Maya and the exits. "Sarah?" Maya kept her voice gentle, the tone she'd learned in her victim advocacy training. "I'm not here to hurt you. I found Diesel by the lake. He was hungry and scared." At the sound of his name, the dog's tail began to wag, his whole body vibrating with contained excitement. Sarah Chen stopped halfway down the stairs, and Maya saw tears streaming down her face. "Diesel?" Sarah whispered. "Oh God, I thought they'd killed him too." The words hit Maya like ice water. "Who's they?" Sarah reached the bottom of the stairs but kept her distance. Up close, Maya could see the exhaustion etched in her features, the way her clothes hung loose on her frame, the constant surveillance of someone who'd been running too long. "You really don't know who I am?" Sarah asked. "This isn't some elaborate setup?" "I know you're scared," Maya said. "I know you're running from something, and I know Diesel loves you enough to try to find help when you needed it." As if understanding, Diesel looked between the two women, then trotted halfway to Sarah before stopping and looking back at Maya. The message was clear: bridge the gap, bring his people together. Sarah knelt down, and Diesel bounded to her, nearly knocking her over with his enthusiasm. As she buried her face in his fur, Maya saw the gun tucked into the back of Sarah's jeans. Not a victim then, or at least not just a victim. 3 months ago, I witnessed something I shouldn't have, Sarah said without looking up. A murder. A federal prosecutor named James Morrison. They made it look like a robbery, but I saw the whole thing from my apartment window. Maya's blood chilled. She'd seen that name in the news, A high-profile case involving organized crime, political corruption, the kind of case that made enemies of very dangerous people. You testified? I was supposed to. Sarah's laugh held no humor. FBI put me in protective custody, promised they'd keep me safe until the trial, but someone leaked my location. I barely got out alive. The pieces began falling into place, the careful wording of the note, the remote location, the fear in Sarah's eyes that went deeper than simple paranoia. So you've been hiding here? Moving around. This was just supposed to be one night, but Diesel got spooked by something and bolted. I've been looking for him for 3 days. Sarah stood, keeping one hand on the dog's head. I was starting to think he was all I had left, and I'd lost him too. Maya studied the younger woman, recognizing something of herself in the stubborn set of Sarah's jaw, the way she positioned herself near cover despite her apparent relief. Survival instincts ran deeper than gratitude. The people who killed Morrison, do you know who they are? Sarah's expression hardened. Corporate cleanup crew. The prosecutor was investigating money laundering through construction contracts. Big money, connected people. She paused. The kind of people who don't leave witnesses alive. A car engine echoed from outside, growing closer. Both women froze, and Diesel's ears perked up, a low growl building in his throat. "Did anyone follow you here?" Sarah whispered, her hand moving toward her weapon. Maya's mind raced through the past hour, the empty roads, the careful route she'd taken, the feeling of being watched that she'd dismissed as paranoia. Her old instincts kicked in, the hyper-awareness that had kept her alive in darker times. "I don't think so," she said, "but I might have been wrong." Maya's hands trembled as she held the photograph, the faces staring back at her like ghosts from a life she'd tried to bury. The little girl couldn't have been more than 8, with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile that made Maya's chest tighten. The man beside her looked ordinary. Brown hair, kind eyes, the sort of person who'd help you carry groceries or shovel your driveway without being asked. "This is them," she whispered, though Bear was the only one there to hear. The dog had positioned himself between her and the door, as if sensing the danger that seemed to follow wherever that photograph went. She turned the picture over, hoping for more clues, and found a date scrawled in blue ink. Emma's 8th birthday, March 15th. The handwriting was careful, practiced, a parent documenting precious moments. Maya calculated quickly. If the photo was recent, that would make Emma 9 now, old enough to understand that her father was gone, but too young to comprehend why. The motel room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in as Maya considered her options. She could take Bear to a shelter, turn over the collar to local police, and disappear again. Start fresh somewhere new with a different name, different hair color, different life. It would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But something about the careful way the collar had been prepared, the trust in Bear's eyes, the thought of a 9-year-old girl wondering if her father was ever coming home, made running feel like cowardice. Maya pulled out the laptop she'd bought with cash 2 towns back and connected to the motel's spotty Wi-Fi. She started with basic searches, trying to find any news stories about missing federal witnesses or unsolved disappearances in the region. The results were frustratingly sparse. Either the case was too sensitive for public reporting or she wasn't looking in the right places. Bear whined softly, his ears pricking toward the window. Maya froze, listening. A car had pulled into the parking lot, its engine running rough like it needed a tune-up. Nothing unusual about that in a place like this, but Bear's reaction set her on edge. She moved to the window and peered through a gap in the curtains. A black sedan sat 3 spaces down, windows tinted dark enough that she couldn't see inside. It could have been anyone. A traveling salesman, another person running from something, a couple seeking privacy. But the way it sat there, engine still running, made her think of surveillance. Maya's Hell's Angels training kicked in. Never stay anywhere too long. Always have an exit strategy. Trust your instincts, especially when they're screaming danger. She began packing quickly, shoving clothes into her duffel bag while keeping one eye on the sedan. Bear watched her movements, tension radiating from his compact frame. As she zipped the bag closed, the car's engine finally cut off. Maya's pulse quickened. The smart move would be to slip out the back, take Bear, and vanish into the night. But something made her hesitate. If these were the people who'd taken the witness, Emma's father, then running might only delay the inevitable. Worse, it might mean abandoning the only lead that could bring a little girl's father home. Maya made a decision that surprised her. Instead of running, she double-checked the chain lock and settled into the chair by the window, laptop open, continuing her research. If someone was watching, let them watch. But she wouldn't be caught off guard. 20 minutes later, her persistence paid off. Buried in a local newspaper's archive, she found a brief mention of a federal trial that had been postponed indefinitely due to witness availability issues. The case involved money laundering through motorcycle clubs, territory Maya knew intimately from her past life. The pieces began clicking together. A federal witness in a case targeting motorcycle clubs. A man who'd disappeared with secrets someone was willing to kill for. And now Maya, with her Hells Angels background, had stumbled into the middle of it all. Bear's low growl brought her attention back to the window. The sedan was still there, but now she could see the faint glow of cigarettes inside, at least 2 people waiting. Professional patients that spoke of law enforcement or something worse. Maya closed the laptop and looked down at Bear, who met her gaze with unwavering trust. In his eyes she saw an echo of her younger self, the woman who'd joined the Hells Angels, not for the thrill or rebellion, but because sometimes the most dangerous choice was also the only honorable one. "Okay, boy," she whispered, scratching behind his ears. "Looks like we're not running after all." She pulled out her phone and stared at a number she'd memorized but never called. A contact from her old life who owed her a favor. Someone who might have answers about federal witnesses and missing fathers and little girls waiting for someone to bring their world back together. Outside, the watchers continued their vigil, unaware that their quarry had just decided to stop being prey. The warehouse smelled of rust and old motor oil, a scent that transported Maya back 15 years to when she could strip an engine blindfolded. Her fingers traced the Harley's chrome exhaust pipe, muscle memory flooding back as she checked the bike's condition. Everything looked good, too good for something that had been sitting in storage. "You kept her running," she said, not looking up at Tank. "Course I did. Knew you'd be back someday." His voice carried no judgment, just the matter-of-fact tone she remembered. "Question is, what kind of heat you bringing to my door?" Maya straightened, meeting his weathered gaze. Tank had aged, more grey in his beard, deeper lines around his eyes, but those eyes still missed nothing. She could lie to federal agents, to social workers, even to herself, but Tank would see through it all. The kind that kills innocent people if I don't handle it right. Tank nodded slowly, processing this. "The Fed?" Sarah Chen. She witnessed something big enough that someone's willing to torture a kid to find her. Maya's jaw tightened. "They took Emma to get to me, thinking I know where Sarah is." "Do you?" "No. But I'm going to find her before they do." Tank walked to a workbench, his heavy boots echoing in the cavernous space. He picked up a wrench, turned it over in his scarred hands. "You know what you're asking? Getting back in means staying in. Club doesn't do part-time anymore, not with the heat we've been under." Maya felt the walls of her carefully constructed new life crumbling. 3 years of therapy, of learning to trust again, of building something clean and honest, all of it balanced on a knife's edge. But Emma's terrified face flashed through her mind. What's the situation now? Who's in charge? Viper's still president. Razor moved up to sergeant-at-arms after the Fresno bust took out half the leadership. Tank's expression darkened. "Things got harder after you left, meaner. Some of the new blood, they don't respect the old codes." The old codes. Maya almost laughed at the irony. The Hells Angels had their own twisted honor system. Loyalty above all, protect your own, never rat out a brother. It had been both her salvation and her damnation. "I need information, Tank. Someone's hunting federal witnesses and they've got resources. professional interrogators, surveillance capabilities. This isn't some street crew. Sounds like Kozlov's people. The name hit Maya like a physical blow. Dmitry Kozlov, arms dealer, human trafficker, and the reason she'd first gone underground with the Angels. Her brother Danny had gotten mixed up with Kozlov's organization, and when he'd tried to get out, they'd made an example of him. Maya had joined the Angels for protection and stayed for revenge. I thought Kozlov was locked up. Was. Got out 6 months ago on a technicality. Been rebuilding his operation ever since. Tank set down the wrench, his expression grim. Word is he's got a hit list of everyone who testified against him. Sarah Chen's probably on it. Maya's mind raced. If Kozlov was behind this, then Emma was in more danger than she'd realized. The Russian didn't leave loose ends, and he had a particular hatred for law enforcement and anyone who helped them. I need to see Viper. Maya. Tank's voice carried a warning. Viper's not the same man you remember. Prison changed him, made him paranoid, ruthless. He blames you for the raids that followed your disappearance. Did I cause them? Tank was quiet for a long moment. Feds came asking questions after you vanished. Wanted to know about your connections, your activities. We stonewalled them, but they kept the pressure on. Eventually found other ways in. Guilt twisted in Maya's stomach. She'd known there might be consequences to her escape, but she'd been too desperate, too broken to care. Now good people had paid the price for her cowardice. Set up the meeting. Tank studied her face, seeing something there that satisfied him. You're different. Harder in some ways, but cleaner too. Whatever you've been doing, it's been good for you. I had help. Maya thought of Dr. Martinez, of the support group, of all the small steps toward healing. But none of that matters if Emma dies because of my past. Tank nodded and pulled out a battered cell phone. I'll make the call. But Maya, once you walk back into this world, there's no guarantee you'll walk back out. Viper's going to want something from you, something big. And if Kozlov really is involved, then I'm the only one who knows how he thinks, how he operates. Maya swung her leg over the Harley, feeling the familiar weight settle around her. Sometimes the only way out is through. The engine roared to life, drowning out Tank's response, but she saw his expression, equal parts pride and sorrow, as she rode back into the darkness she'd spent 3 years trying to escape. The warehouse district stretched before Maya like a concrete graveyard, each building a tombstone marking another dead industrial dream. She kept Bandit close as they moved through the shadows between streetlights, her hand never straying far from the Glock tucked beneath her jacket. The address from the note had led them here, to a world that smelled of rust and abandonment. 23 Pier Street sat hunched between 2 taller buildings like a broken tooth. The windows were boarded up, but Maya caught the faint glow of light bleeding through cracks in the plywood. Someone was home. She studied the building for 10 minutes before making her move, cataloguing exits, noting the fire escape that hung like a metal skeleton against the brick wall. Old habits died hard, and right now those habits might keep her alive. Bandit's ears pricked forward, and Maya felt the dog's muscles tense. Someone was coming. The footsteps were careful, measured, not the casual gait of a homeless person or urban explorer. Maya pressed herself against the wall, pulling Bandit into the deeper shadows. A figure emerged from the alley behind the warehouse, moving with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to violence. Even in the dim light, Maya recognized the walk before she saw the face. Tommy the Wrench Castellanos had always moved like a predator, and 15 years hadn't changed that. What had changed was his allegiance. Last she'd heard, Tommy had gone independent after the club fell apart, hiring himself out to whoever paid best. He disappeared through a side door, and Maya counted to 60 before following. The door hung slightly ajar, and she could hear voices drifting from somewhere inside the building. She eased through the opening, Bandit silent beside her. The warehouse had been gutted, leaving a maze of support pillars and forgotten machinery. Maya moved from shadow to shadow, following the sound of conversation toward the far end of the building. The voices grew clearer as she approached, Tommy's gravelly baritone, and another voice she didn't recognize, younger and sharp with fear. She reached a vantage point behind a rusted conveyor belt and peered around its edge. In a circle of harsh light cast by work lamps, Tommy stood over a man duct-taped to a metal chair. The prisoner was maybe 40, soft around the middle, with the pale complexion of someone who spent his life behind a desk. Blood trickled from his nose, and his left eye was swelling shut. "I'm going to ask you one more time, Brian," Tommy said, his voice carrying the patient tone of a man who enjoyed his work. "Where's the list?" "I told you." The man, Brian, gasped. "I don't know what you're talking about." Tommy sighed and picked up a crowbar from a nearby table. Maya's blood chilled as she recognized the tool that had earned him his nickname. "See, that's where you're wrong. We know you copied the files before you ran. We know you've got names, dates, everything. The only question is whether I have to take you apart piece by piece to get it." Maya's mind raced. This had to be connected to the dog, to the note. Brian must be the federal witness, the one whose disappearance had set this whole chain of events in motion. But what was this list Tommy wanted? And who was we? Her question was answered when two more figures stepped into the light. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She knew those faces, even after all these years. Razor Jim and Viper Pete, two of the most vicious enforcers from her old life. They'd been Marcus's men, his personal collection agency for debts both financial and personal, which meant Marcus knew she was alive, knew she was involved somehow. Bandit shifted beside her, a low growl building in his throat. Maya pressed her hand against his muzzle, her heart hammering. One sound, and they'd all be dead. "Boss wants this wrapped up clean," Razor Jim was saying. "No loose ends, no complications. The broad and the dog disappear permanently once we get what we need." Tommy nodded, testing the weight of the crowbar. "What about the accountant here?" "Him too. But first, we need that list. Every name, every transaction. The feds think they're clever, but they don't know who they're playing with." Brian's face had gone white. "Please, I have a family. I have kids." "Should have thought about that before you decided to grow a conscience," Viper Pete said. "Testifying against people who trusted you? That's just bad manners." Maya closed her eyes, weighing her options. She could walk away, take Bandit and disappear into the night. Change her name again, find another small town, another quiet life. It would be the smart play, the safe play. But Brian's terrified face reminded her of another face, her own reflection in the mirror during those final months with Marcus. The same fear, the same desperate hope that someone, anyone, might care enough to help. She'd gotten out, survived, built something resembling a life from the ashes of her old one. Maybe it was time to stop running. The warehouse smelled of rust and old motor oil, a scent that transported Maya back 15 years to when she'd spent countless hours in similar places, watching mechanics work on Harleys while deals were made in shadowy corners. She pressed herself against the corrugated metal wall, listening to the voices inside. "The woman's got the dog," a gravelly voice said. "Boss wants them both brought in tonight." "What about the witness? Still in the wind. But if we get the mutt, Chen will come running." Maya's grip tightened on the crowbar she'd found outside. Through a grimy window, she could see 3 men standing around a card table covered with weapons and photographs. Her blood ran cold when she recognized her own face among them. Not a recent photo, but one from her Angel's days, all leather and defiance. They knew who she was. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Somehow her carefully constructed new identity had crumbled. All those years of looking over her shoulder, of jumping at unexpected sounds, had been justified. The past never really let go. But as she studied the photos scattered on the table, another image caught her attention. A young Asian woman with kind eyes and a nervous smile. This had to be Susan Chen, the federal witness whose disappearance had set everything in motion. The woman was barely 30, probably younger than Maya had been when she'd first tried to escape Marcus. The familiar weight of the burner phone in her pocket felt heavier now. Tommy Russo's number was still programmed in, a lifeline to a world she'd sworn to leave behind. The old Maya would have made that call without hesitation, would have leveraged every connection and called in every favor to protect herself. But standing here, looking at Susan Chen's photograph, she felt the uncomfortable stirring of something she'd thought Marcus had beaten out of her, the need to protect someone weaker. Inside the warehouse, footsteps echoed as one of the men moved toward a laptop computer. "Feds are getting antsy," he said, typing rapidly. "They want Chen back in protective custody before the trial next week." "She should have stayed put," another man replied. "Stupid girl thought she could disappear on her own." Maya knew that desperation, the claustrophobic feeling of protection that felt too much like another kind of prison. Susan had run for the same reasons Maya had. Sometimes the only choice was between one kind of danger and another. The dog's leash was wrapped around her wrist, and she could feel the animal's tension through the leather. Whatever training or instinct the German shepherd possessed, it seemed to understand they were close to something important. The note Susan had attached to its collar had been brief but desperate. "Find Tommy at the Blue Moon. Tell him Chen needs the favor he owes." But Tommy was 3 states away, and Maya was here, crouched outside a warehouse full of armed men who wanted her dead. A new voice cut through her thoughts, and Maya's entire body went rigid. Well, well, looks like somebody's been busy. She spun around to find Marcus standing 10 feet away, his scarred hands loose at his sides. He looked exactly the same as the night she'd fled. Cold blue eyes, predatory smile, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. "Hello, Maya. Miss me?" Her mouth went dry. The crowbar felt useless against him. It had always been useless against him. "How did you find me?" "Baby, you think I ever stopped looking?" Marcus stepped closer, and she noticed the gun tucked into his waistband. "Took a while, I'll give you that. But when your face started showing up in federal databases connected to a missing witness, well, let's just say certain people owed me favors." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Marcus wasn't working alone. He was working with whoever wanted Susan Chen silenced. The same corruption that had driven the young woman from protective custody was now reaching back into Maya's past, dragging her worst nightmare into the present. "The dog's just business," Marcus continued, his voice taking on the reasonable tone that had always preceded his worst violence. "But you're personal. You embarrassed me, Maya, made me look weak." The warehouse door opened behind her, and she heard the other men approaching. She was trapped between Marcus and the building, with nowhere to run. The dog pressed against her legs, a warm reminder that this wasn't just about her anymore. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, drawing his gun. "You're going to give me the dog, and then you're coming home where you belong. The witness can run all she wants. Won't matter much longer." Maya looked at the weapon, then at Marcus's face, seeing the same cruel satisfaction she'd watched him take in her fear for years. But something had changed. She was no longer the broken woman who'd fled in the middle of the night. She'd built a life, found her strength, discovered who she could be without his shadow over her. The burner phone buzzed in her pocket. The warehouse smelled like rust and old motor oil, triggering memories Maya had spent years trying to bury. She crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, watching 3 men in expensive suits survey the empty space where she'd hidden Sarah just hours before. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the calculated way they moved. Predators hunting prey. "She was here," one of them said, his voice carrying the flat accent of someone who'd grown up far from the Pacific Northwest. "Coffee's still warm." Maya's hand instinctively moved to the knife strapped to her thigh, muscle memory from a life she'd left behind. The skills she'd learned riding with the angels had kept her alive then, and she had a sinking feeling they were about to be tested again. Bruno pressed against her leg, his massive body trembling with suppressed energy. The dog's loyalty to Sarah ran deeper than any training. He understood they were hunting his person, and every fiber of his being wanted to tear these men apart. Maya placed a steadying hand on his head, feeling the same rage burning in her chest. The youngest of the 3 men kicked over the makeshift bed Sarah had been using. "Cartel's getting impatient, Morrison. They want the girl found before she can testify. Morrison, tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone accustomed to giving orders, examined the scattered belongings with clinical interest. She won't get far. Martinez saw to that when he eliminated her handler. Maya's blood ran cold. Agent Rodriguez was dead. The one person who might have helped them navigate this nightmare was gone, which meant Sarah was completely alone except for a burned-out biker and a loyal dog. What about the woman who's been helping her? The third man consulted his phone. Neighbors reported seeing someone matching Martinez's description of the target. Find her too. Morrison's voice carried the casual brutality of someone who ordered executions like coffee. Anyone who's seen the girl's face becomes a liability. Maya closed her eyes, weighing her options. She could disappear, change her name again, find another small town, another quiet life. It's what survival instinct screamed at her to do. But Sarah's face flashed in her mind, young and terrified, asking if Maya would abandon her like everyone else had. The men spread out to search the warehouse more thoroughly. Maya counted their weapons, all armed, all professional. In her past life, she might have called for backup, but those bridges had burned when she chose freedom over loyalty to a club that treated women like property. She was on her own, just like always. Moving with the stealth that had once helped her slip past rival gang territories, Maya worked her way toward the warehouse's rear exit. Bruno followed silently, his training evident in every careful step. They were almost clear when her phone buzzed, a text from the burner number she'd given Sarah. They found me. Help. Maya stared at the screen, her carefully constructed new life crumbling around her. Sarah was 19, the same age Maya had been when she'd first run from violence, desperate and alone. The difference was no one had risked their safety to help Maya survive. Boss. One of the searchers had found something, blood trail leading to the back alley. Maya's decision crystallized in that moment. She couldn't live with herself if she walked away, knowing what these men would do to Sarah. Some lines couldn't be uncrossed, and maybe it was time to stop running from who she'd been and start using those hard-earned skills for something that mattered. She pulled up her contacts and scrolled to a name she hadn't called in 3 years. Jack Torch Morrison, no relation to the federal agent hunting them, owed her a favor from the old days, a big one. Maya? His gravelly voice carried surprise and wariness. Thought you were dead. Not yet. I need help, Torch. You burned that bridge when you left. This isn't about the club. There's a girl. Feds, cartel, the whole nightmare. She's 19. A long pause. Torch had daughters. What do you need? Firepower, clean transport, and someone who remembers how to make people disappear. Christ, Maya. You know what you're asking. She watched Morrison's men closing in on her position, their systematic search leaving fewer places to hide. Bruno growled low in his throat, sensing the approaching danger. I know exactly what I'm asking. Question is whether you remember what family means. Another pause, then the sound of keys jingling. Send me the address. And Maya? This makes us even understood. She ended the call and looked down at Bruno, seeing her own determination reflected in his intelligent eyes. They were committed now, past the point of safe choices. Maya checked her weapons and started moving toward whatever remained of her old life, praying it would be enough to save Sarah's future. The warehouse smelled like rust and old motor oil, triggering memories Sarah had spent 3 years trying to forget. Marcus led her through a maze of shipping containers while Max trotted beside them, his tail wagging as if he sensed they were getting closer to something important. The Kozlov operation runs deeper than anyone imagined, Marcus said, his voice echoing off the metal walls. They're not just moving drugs anymore. Human trafficking, weapons, stolen identities. They've built an empire on the bodies of people like Elena. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her jacket pocket where she kept the knife. How do you know Elena didn't just run? Witnesses disappear all the time. Marcus stopped beside a blue container and pulled out a key. Because I was supposed to extract her 2 nights ago, she never made it to the safe house. He unlocked the heavy door and gestured for Sarah to follow him inside. The container had been converted into a mobile command center. Banks of monitors lined the walls, showing surveillance feeds from across the city. Sarah recognized some of the locations: the diner where she'd waited tables, the park where she walked Max, even the street outside her apartment building. "Jesus," she whispered, "how long have you been watching me?" "Since the day you showed up at that animal shelter asking about Max." Marcus pulled up a chair and began typing on a keyboard. "The Kozlovs have been tracking the dog too. They know he's the key to finding Elena." On the main screen, a photograph appeared. A young woman with dark hair and frightened eyes. She looked barely 20, clutching Max against her chest in what appeared to be a hotel room. "Elena Vasquez," Marcus continued. 17 years old when the Kozlovs trafficked her from Guatemala. She spent 2 years in their operation before she managed to escape. What she saw, what she can testify to, it would bring down their entire network. Sarah studied the photo, seeing something familiar in the girl's defiant expression despite her obvious terror. It was the same look Sarah had worn in the mirror after each beating from Tony, the stubborn refusal to be completely broken. "The note we found on Max," she said. "It wasn't random, was it?" Marcus shook his head. "Elena researched you before she disappeared. She knew about your past with the angels, about what happened with Tony. She thought if something went wrong, you might understand what she was going through." The weight of that trust settled heavily on Sarah's shoulders. A girl she'd never met had looked at her criminal record and seen not a cautionary tale, but a kindred spirit. Someone who might care enough to help. "Where do you think she is?" Sarah asked. "That's what we need to figure out." Marcus pulled up a map showing red dots scattered across the metropolitan area. "These are known Kozlov properties. We've searched most of them, but Elena's smart. She wouldn't hide somewhere obvious." Max had been exploring the container, sniffing at corners and equipment. Suddenly, he stopped near a stack of papers on one of the desks, his ears perked up and tail wagging frantically. Sarah followed him over and saw what had caught his attention: a printout of building permits and real estate transactions. One address was circled in red ink: 1247 Industrial Boulevard. "What's this place?" she asked. Marcus looked at the paper and frowned. "Old textile factory, abandoned for 5 years. We checked it last week. Nothing there." But Max was practically vibrating with excitement, pawing at the paper and whimpering. Sarah had learned to trust the dog's instincts over the past few days. "Maybe you missed something," she said. "Or maybe Elena wasn't there when you looked." Before Marcus could respond, his radio crackled to life. "Agent Torres, we have a problem." Kozlov vehicles spotted moving toward the warehouse district. At least 6 cars. Sarah's blood turned cold. "They found us." Marcus was already moving, shutting down equipment and grabbing files. "There's a back exit through the container yard. We can—" The sound of car engines cut him off. Through the small window in the container door, Sarah could see headlights approaching fast. "No time," she said, her old instincts kicking in. "How many rounds do you have?" "Sarah, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm volunteering." She pulled out her knife, feeling the familiar weight in her hand. "Elena trusted me with her dog. That means something." Max seemed to understand the danger. He pressed close to Sarah's leg, no longer the playful companion, but alert and ready. The engines stopped. Car doors slammed. Voices shouted orders in accented English, coordinating their approach. Marcus handed Sarah a pistol from a weapons case. 6 rounds. Make them count. She checked the chamber, muscle memory guiding her movements. 3 years of hiding, of trying to be someone different, fell away like shed skin. Elena was out there somewhere, probably terrified and alone, trusting that someone would come for her. The container door rattled as someone tested the lock outside. The warehouse smelled of rust and motor oil, a scent that transported Maya back 15 years to when she'd felt invincible. Now, crouched behind a stack of shipping crates with Luna pressed against her side, she felt anything but powerful. The dog's breathing was shallow but steady, and Maya could feel the slight tremor in her injured leg. Footsteps echoed through the cavernous space. Heavy boots on concrete, moving with purpose. Maya counted at least 4 distinct sets, maybe more. Her hand instinctively moved to the Glock tucked in her waistband, a weapon she'd hoped never to touch again. "We know you're in here," a voice called out. Deep, gravelly, with the kind of authority that came from years of making people disappear. "Rodriguez wants to talk. That's all. Just talk." Maya almost laughed at the absurdity. Rodriguez's idea of conversation typically ended with body bags. She'd seen enough evidence of that during her time with the Angels, when they'd occasionally crossed paths with his organization. Back then, she'd been Sierra Martinez, feared and respected. Now she was just Maya Chen, a woman trying to protect an injured dog and find a missing kid. Luna shifted beside her, and Maya placed a gentle hand on the dog's head. The movement reminded her of the note she'd found in Luna's collar, the one that had started this nightmare. "If you're reading this, Sarah is in danger. Trust no one. J. Sarah." The federal witness everyone was hunting. A 16-year-old girl whose testimony could bring down half of Rodriguez's empire. And somehow, Maya had stumbled into the middle of it all because she couldn't ignore a wounded animal. The footsteps were getting closer. Maya peered around the edge of a crate and spotted a man in an expensive suit picking his way through the debris. Not Rodriguez himself, but probably one of his lieutenants. 2 others flanked him, both carrying assault rifles like they were extensions of their arms. Maya's phone vibrated silently in her pocket. A text from the number she'd been using to communicate with Jack, Luna's owner, North Exit. 5 minutes. Come alone. She stared at the message, her mind racing. It could be a trap, probably was a trap, but it was also the first direct contact she'd had since this started, and time was running out. Every moment they spent in this warehouse increased the chances that Rodriguez's men would find them. Another text appeared. "Sarah says Luna likes bacon treats." Maya's breath caught. Only Luna's real owner would know something that specific. She'd watched the dog ignore every treat she'd offered, except for the bacon ones she'd found in the emergency kit. The sound of splitting wood echoed through the warehouse as Rodriguez's men began systematically searching the shipping containers. They were methodical, professional. They'd find her hiding spot within minutes. Maya made her decision. She scooped Luna into her arms, feeling the dog's weight and the trust in her dark eyes. The north exit was 50 yards away, past 2 open areas where she'd be completely exposed, but staying here meant certain death, and probably worse for Sarah, wherever she was. "I'm going to get us out of here," Maya whispered to Luna. The dog seemed to understand, settling more securely in her arms. Maya took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the crates. The first gunman spotted her immediately, his rifle swinging in her direction. But Maya was already moving, muscle memory from her old life taking over. She dodged left, using a concrete pillar for cover as bullets sparked off the metal behind her. "There! Don't let her reach the exit." Maya ran like her life depended on it, because it did. Luna's weight threw off her balance, but she adjusted, finding a rhythm that ate up the distance to the north door. More gunfire erupted behind her, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. She burst through the exit into blinding sunlight and found herself in an alley lined with dumpsters. A figure stepped out from behind one of them, and Maya's gun was in her hand before she consciously drew it. "Easy," the man said, raising his hands. He was mid-40s, graying at the temples, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of hard years. "I'm Jack, Luna's Jack." The dog in Maya's arms whined and struggled, reaching toward the man. It was the first real animation Luna had shown since Maya found her. "Prove it," Maya said, keeping her weapon trained on him. Jack smiled sadly and whistled a complex pattern of notes. Luna's response was immediate and joyful, a soft bark that somehow conveyed pure happiness despite her injuries. "We need to move," Jack said. "Rodriguez's people will be through that door in seconds. Sarah's waiting, but she won't wait long. She's scared, and she should be." Maya holstered her weapon and followed Jack deeper into the alley, Luna still in her arms. Behind them, she could hear Rodriguez's men shouting, organizing their pursuit. "Where is she?" Maya asked. "Somewhere even I'm not sure is safe anymore," Jack replied grimly. "And after today, nowhere will be." The warehouse district stretched out like a graveyard of abandoned dreams, rusted shipping containers stacked like tombstones against the grey dawn sky. Maya crouched behind a concrete barrier, watching the building through binoculars she'd lifted from a sporting goods store. The place looked dead, but she'd learned long ago that appearances meant nothing in this business. Rex pressed against her leg, his breathing steady but alert. The dog had led them here through a maze of back streets and industrial lots, following some instinct Maya didn't understand but had learned to trust. 3 days of following cold leads and dodging both Kozlov's men and federal agents had brought them to this moment. "You sure about this, boy?" she whispered, scratching behind his ears. Rex's tail gave a single decisive thump. The building squatted like a concrete beast, its windows painted black, loading docks sealed with corrugated metal. But there, a flicker of movement behind a second-story window. Someone was definitely inside. Maya's phone buzzed. "Marcus, tell me you're not about to do something stupid." His voice crackled through the encrypted line. "Define stupid. Going in there without backup. My contacts say Kozlov's got at least 6 men in that area, maybe more, and the feds are closing in from the north." Maya adjusted her grip on the Glock tucked into her waistband. "Sarah Chen's been missing for 5 days. Every hour we wait, her chances get worse. And every minute you stay exposed, your chances get worse too. These people killed your ex, Maya. They won't hesitate to do the same to you." She thought about Jake's funeral. How empty it had felt. How she'd stood at the back, watching from a distance as they lowered him into the ground. Despite everything he'd put her through, despite the fear and pain, seeing him in that box had hollowed something out inside her chest. "Maybe that's what I deserve." "Bullshit." Marcus's voice turned sharp. "You think hiding from life is some kind of penance? You think Sarah Chen deserves to die because you feel guilty about surviving?" The words hit like a slap. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every choice that had led her here. The Hell's Angels patch she'd burned years ago, the night she'd spent running from Jake's fists, the new identity she'd built from nothing, only to watch it crumble the moment she'd chosen to help instead of hide. "I can't leave her in there. Then we do this smart. Give me 20 minutes to get into position. 20 minutes might be 19 too many." Through the binoculars, she saw movement in the main floor windows, shadows shifting, the brief gleam of something metallic. They were preparing to move, either to relocate Sarah or to eliminate loose ends. Maya had seen this dance before, back in her Angels days, the careful choreography that preceded violence. "I'm going in. Maya, goddammit." She ended the call and slipped the phone into her pocket. Rex watched her with those intelligent brown eyes, head tilted slightly to one side. "Okay, boy. Time to earn that fancy training your owner gave you." They moved together through the maze of shipping containers, using the shadows and rust-stained metal for cover. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands stayed steady. This was the thing about violence. Once you'd lived with it long enough, your body remembered how to navigate its rhythms even when your mind screamed in protest. The service entrance hung open, a deliberate invitation or a careless mistake. Maya studied the gap for 30 seconds, watching for movement, listening for voices. Nothing but the distant hum of traffic and Rex's soft breathing. She touched the dog's head, pointed at the entrance, and whispered, "Find." Rex's transformation was immediate and startling. The friendly pet disappeared, replaced by something focused and predatory. He slipped through the entrance like liquid shadow, and Maya followed, gun drawn, safety off. The warehouse floor stretched out in pools of grey light filtering through painted windows. Wooden crates stacked in irregular patterns created a labyrinth of potential hiding spots and ambush points. Maya moved carefully, using Rex as her early warning system, watching his ears and posture for signs of danger. Then she heard it, a woman's voice, strained but defiant, coming from somewhere above them. I already told you, I don't know where. The voice cut off abruptly, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Maya found the stairs tucked behind a wall of pallets, metal grating, each step a potential alarm bell. She tested each one carefully, distributing her weight, moving with the patience her old mentor had drilled into her during those violent years she'd tried so hard to forget. Rex reached the top first, body tense, one paw raised. Maya joined him at the landing, pressed against the wall, listening to the voices bleeding through the thin door ahead of them. Running out of patience, Miss Chen. The accent was thick, Russian, tinged with the kind of casual menace that came from years of hurting people without consequence. Maya checked her weapon one final time and reached for the door handle. The warehouse felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, her heart hammering against her ribs as she counted the guards patrolling the perimeter. 3 that she could see, probably more inside. The Glock felt heavy in her hand, a familiar weight that brought back memories she'd tried so hard to bury. Marcus pressed close beside her, his breathing shallow. "We should wait for backup," he whispered. "There is no backup." Sarah's voice was barely audible. Chen's people could move Emma any minute. "This is our only shot." Through the grimy windows, she caught glimpses of movement inside the main building. The intel from Tommy had been solid. Chen was using the old textile warehouse as a temporary holding facility before moving high-value assets offshore. Emma Morrison, the federal witness whose dog had started this whole nightmare, was somewhere in that concrete maze. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, letting muscle memory take over. The angels had taught her how to read a building, how to find the weak points, how to move like smoke through enemy territory. She'd sworn never to use those skills again, but Emma's life hung in the balance. There, she pointed to a loading dock on the east side. Security cameras been spray-painted. Someone wanted a blind spot. Could be a trap. Everything's a trap now. Sarah checked her weapon one last time. "Stay close, watch for my signals, and whatever happens, don't hesitate. These people don't take prisoners." They moved like shadows across the broken asphalt, using abandoned machinery and rusted cars for cover. Sarah's old leather boots made no sound on the concrete. Some habits died hard. The loading dock door stood slightly ajar, just as Tommy had promised it would be. Sarah slipped through first, immediately pressing herself against the wall. The warehouse stretched out before them, a labyrinth of corridors and offices built into the main floor. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in sickly yellow pools. A voice echoed from somewhere deep in the building, Chen's distinctive accent cutting through the silence. "The federal marshals are getting desperate. They're offering triple the usual rate for information on our guest." Sarah motioned for Marcus to follow as she crept toward the sound. They passed empty offices with shattered windows and graffiti-covered walls. The place reeked of mildew and something else. Fear, maybe, or death. "She's becoming more trouble than she's worth," another voice replied. Sarah recognized it as Kozlov, Chen's enforcer. "Perhaps we should cut our losses." "Not yet. She's our insurance policy. As long as the feds think she's alive, they'll negotiate." They were close now. Sarah could see light spilling from a doorway at the end of the corridor. She held up her fist, signaling Marcus to stop, then crept forward alone. Through the crack in the door, she could see Chen pacing in what looked like a makeshift office. Kozlov sat at a metal desk, cleaning a pistol with methodical precision. But no Emma. Sarah retreated, her mind racing. If Emma wasn't in the office, she had to be in one of the back rooms. The problem was getting past Chen and his men without raising an alarm. She thought of Buddy, probably curled up in Marcus's apartment, waiting for his owner to come home. The dog had trusted her with his desperate message. She couldn't let him down. A new plan formed in her mind. Reckless, dangerous, but it might work. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a number she hadn't called in years. Angel, her old riding partner, now running security for half the criminal enterprises in the city. If anyone could create a distraction big enough to draw Chen's attention, it was him. The phone rang once before a gravelly voice answered. "Well, I'll be damned. Heard you went straight, Sarah." I need a favor, Angel. Big one. What's it worth to you? Sarah looked back at Marcus, saw the determination in his eyes, thought about Emma Morrison somewhere in this hellhole because she'd tried to do the right thing, everything. There was a pause. Where and when? Industrial District, Chen's warehouse. 5 minutes. Consider it done. But Sarah, this makes us even. After tonight, I don't know you. The line went dead. Sarah pocketed the phone and returned to Marcus. When the fireworks start, we move fast. Emma's got to be in the back section. We find her. We get out. No heroes. What fireworks? Before Sarah could answer, the sound of motorcycle engines roared to life outside the warehouse. Lots of them. Chen's voice erupted in Chinese curses as his men scrambled for weapons and positions. Now, Sarah whispered, and they plunged deeper into the darkness, racing against time to find a woman whose only crime had been witnessing the truth. The warehouse district at midnight felt like a graveyard of rusted dreams. Maya crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, watching the abandoned textile factory where Jake was being held. The building squatted against the skyline like a concrete tumor, its broken windows staring blindly into the darkness. Ranger pressed against her leg, his body tense with anticipation. She'd left him with Mrs. Chen, but the dog had somehow escaped and tracked her here. Now wasn't the time to argue with 60 pounds of determined German shepherd. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, teams in position. Wait for my signal. Maya closed her eyes, centering herself. The leather jacket felt foreign after months in civilian clothes, but the weight of the Glock at her hip was comfortingly familiar. She'd sworn she'd never return to this world of violence and calculated risks, yet here she was, preparing to walk back into hell. A black sedan pulled up to the factory's loading dock. 3 men emerged, their movements sharp and professional. Maya recognized the leader immediately, Vincent Torino, Marcus's second in command. His presence confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't just about silencing Jake, it was about sending a message to anyone who dared cross the family. Through her earpiece, she heard Marcus's voice, visual confirmation, target acquired. Maya studied the building's layout. 2 guards at the main entrance, likely more inside. The loading dock was too exposed, but she spotted a maintenance ladder leading to the roof. It would be risky, but risk was something she understood. She moved like smoke through the shadows, years of training flooding back. The ladder rungs were slick with moisture, but she climbed steadily, Ranger somehow managing to follow with surprising agility for his size. On the roof, she located a skylight that offered a view into the main floor. Below, Jake sat tied to a chair in the center of the vast space, his face swollen and bloodied. Vincent paced around him like a predator, his voice carrying up through the broken glass. You really thought witness protection would keep you safe? We own people in every alphabet agency, kid. Your testimony dies with you tonight. Jake lifted his head defiantly. Others know. Killing me won't stop what's coming. Vincent laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your girlfriend knows, you mean? The washed-up biker hiding in suburbia? Don't worry, she's next. Maya's blood turned to ice. They weren't just after Jake, they'd been watching her all along. Every careful step she'd taken to build a new life had been an illusion. Her phone vibrated. Marcus again, change of plans. Torino called for backup. We're outnumbered. Abort. Maya stared at the message, then at Jake bleeding on the floor below. She thought about Emma Chen's bright smile, about the community garden where she'd finally found peace, about all the people who would suffer if Vincent's organization continued operating. She typed back, negative. Going in. Maya, don't be stupid. This isn't your fight. But it was her fight. It had been from the moment she'd opened that note attached to Ranger's collar. Some things were worth the risk. She found a service entrance on the roof and picked the lock with tools she'd hoped never to use again. The interior was a maze of abandoned machinery and support beams, perfect cover for what she had planned. Moving through the shadows, she positioned herself above where Vincent held court with his men. She counted 6 total, 3 more than Marcus had anticipated. The federal backup was still 20 minutes out according to her last update. Jake was running out of time. Maya pulled out her phone and triggered the fire alarm system she'd hacked during reconnaissance. Immediately, strobing lights flooded the space, and a deafening siren began wailing. In the confusion, she dropped through a gap in the ceiling, landing behind a massive loom. "What the hell?" Vincent's shout was cut off as Maya put 2 rounds center mass into the nearest guard. She rolled behind cover as return fire sparked off machinery around her. "It's her!" Vincent's voice carried over the alarm. "The biker bitch! Take her alive!" Maya smiled grimly. They still underestimated her, still saw her as the woman who'd run from her abusive marriage rather than the Hell's Angels enforcer who'd earned her patch through blood and steel. Ranger appeared from somewhere in the darkness, a snarling shadow that brought down one of the gunmen in a tangle of screams and gunfire. Maya used the distraction to advance, her movements fluid and lethal. Years of suppressed muscle memory flooded back, the way to move through hostile territory, how to read an opponent's stance, when to show mercy, and when to kill without hesitation. She'd tried to bury this part of herself, but it had been waiting patiently for her return. Vincent was shouting orders, but his men were falling back, unprepared for the level of violence she brought to bear. Maya pressed her advantage, moving inexorably toward where Jake waited, still tied and vulnerable in the center of the killing floor. The warehouse district stretched before them like a concrete graveyard, shadows pooling between buildings that had seen better decades. Sarah gripped the steering wheel of Marcus's pickup truck, her knuckles white against the worn leather. In the passenger seat, Tommy Chen checked his service weapon for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. 2 blocks ahead, he murmured, consulting the GPS coordinates they'd extracted from Kozlov's phone. The blue building with the loading dock. Sarah's stomach churned as she spotted their destination. The structure loomed against the night sky, its windows boarded up except for a faint glow emanating from the 2nd floor. 3 vehicles sat in the parking lot, 2 black SUVs and a white van that made her blood run cold. "That's the same van from the motel," she whispered. Tommy nodded grimly. "Kozlov's cleanup crew." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Sarah, once we go in there, there's no turning back. These aren't street thugs. They're trained killers. You think I don't know that?" She killed the engine and checked the .45 tucked into her waistband. "But Emily's in there, and probably Marcus too." They sat in silence for a moment, both understanding the odds. Through the truck's rear window, Diesel whined softly from his crate. Sarah had wanted to leave him with a neighbor, but the dog had refused to be separated from her again. "The loading dock," Tommy said, studying the building through binoculars. "1 guard visible. There's probably a rear entrance." Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled to a number she hadn't called in 3 years. Her finger hovered over the contact labeled Viper. "What are you doing?" Tommy asked. "Insurance." She hit dial before she could change her mind. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Well, well." Phoenix rises from the ashes. "Danny, I need a favor. You burned a lot of bridges when you left, sweetheart. What makes you think—" "Because you owe me," Sarah cut him off. "Remember Tucson? The ATF raid you somehow knew was coming?" A long pause. "What do you need?" Sarah gave him the address and situation in clipped sentences. Danny Viper Morrison had been her lieutenant when she wore the Hell's Angels patch, and despite their complicated history, he understood loyalty. 20 minutes, he said. "Try not to die before we get there." Tommy stared at her as she pocketed the phone. "You just called in the cavalry." "I called in the devil," Sarah corrected. "But sometimes that's what it takes." They approached the building from opposite sides, using the abandoned vehicles scattered around the lot for cover. Sarah's heart hammered as she crept toward a side window, remembering the tactical training she'd learned during her club days. Some skills never left you. Through a crack in the boards, she glimpsed the interior. Emily sat tied to a chair in the center of a large room, her face pale but defiant. 3 men surrounded her, one she recognized as the scarred enforcer from the diner. No sign of Marcus. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Tommy, found another entrance. "Wait for my signal." But as she watched, the scarred man pulled out a knife and moved toward Emily. Sarah's discipline shattered. She couldn't wait. She kicked in a side door, the rotted wood splintering easily. The crash echoed through the building as she rolled inside, coming up with her weapon drawn. "Federal agent!" she shouted, hoping the lie would buy her seconds of confusion. "Drop your weapons!" The three men spun toward her, and she immediately knew she'd made a mistake. They didn't hesitate or demand identification. They simply opened fire. Sarah dove behind a concrete pillar as bullets chipped away chunks of stone above her head. From across the room she heard Emily scream. Tommy's voice boomed from another entrance. "LAPD, building is surrounded." The crossfire intensified, but Sarah noticed something that made her blood freeze. A fourth man emerged from a back room, dragging Marcus by the arm. Even from a distance, she could see the blood on her friend's shirt. "Sarah Chen," the scarred man called out, using her old name. "Yes, we know who you are. Phoenix, right? The bitch who thought she could disappear." Her cover was blown completely. These men hadn't just found Emily by accident. They'd been hunting Sarah all along. "Let them go," she shouted back. "Your problem is with me. Our problem is with loose ends," came the reply. "And you've created too many of them." The sound of motorcycle engines roaring into the parking lot announced Danny's arrival. Through the windows, muzzle flashes lit up the night as the Hell's Angels engaged Kozlov's men outside. Sarah realized this wasn't just about Emily anymore, or even about her own survival. This was war, and she was caught in the middle with two innocent lives hanging in the balance. The scarred man smiled coldly as he pressed his gun to Emily's temple. "Time to choose, Phoenix. Come out or watch them both die." The warehouse smelled of rust and diesel fuel, shadows stretching like dark fingers across the concrete floor. Sarah crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, Zeus pressed against her side, his breathing shallow but steady. The dog had led them here through a maze of back alleys, following some instinct that defied explanation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Feds are 10 minutes out. Whatever you're doing, make it fast." 10 minutes. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she surveyed the layout. 3 black SUVs sat parked near the main entrance, and she could make out at least 6 figures moving between them. The Kozlov crew had beaten them here, but that didn't mean Elena was lost yet. Zeus's ears twitched, and he began padding toward a side entrance, his nose to the ground. Sarah followed, keeping low, her hand instinctively checking for the .38 tucked into her waistband. The weapon felt foreign after so many months of peaceful obscurity, but her muscle memory kicked in with disturbing ease. The side door hung slightly ajar, and voices drifted out in accented English. Sarah pressed herself against the metal frame, straining to listen. "Should have killed her the moment she agreed to testify," a gravelly voice was saying. "Now look at the mess we're in." "Dmitri wants her alive," another voice replied. "At least until we know what she told them." Sarah's blood ran cold. They were talking about Elena, which meant she was still breathing. For now. Zeus whined softly, pawing at the door. Sarah placed a calming hand on his head, then eased the door open another inch. The warehouse interior opened up before her, a vast space filled with shipping containers and machinery. Fluorescent lights cast harsh pools of illumination, leaving plenty of dark corners to hide in. Movement caught her eye near the center of the space. A woman sat tied to a chair, her dark hair hanging forward, obscuring her face. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the resemblance to the photograph Marcus had shown her. Elena Petrov, the witness whose testimony could bring down one of the most dangerous crime syndicates on the East Coast. 2 guards flanked her, while a third man, older, with silver hair and an expensive suit, paced in front of the chair. This had to be someone high up in the organization, someone with real authority. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. A frontal assault was suicide. Even with her Hell's Angels training, she was outnumbered and outgunned, but she'd learned long ago that sometimes the best weapon was chaos. She spotted what she was looking for near the far wall, electrical panels and what looked like the main power supply for the building. If she could create enough confusion, maybe she could get Elena out before the cavalry arrived. Moving like a ghost, Sarah worked her way along the perimeter, using the containers for cover. Zeus stayed close, his injured leg causing him to favor his right side, but not slowing him down. The dog seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, his usual playful demeanor replaced by focused intensity. Sarah reached the electrical panel and studied the layout. One main breaker would kill the lights, but that would also eliminate her ability to see. She needed something more surgical. Her fingers found a series of smaller switches, individual circuits that probably controlled different sections of the building. The sound of a phone ringing echoed through the warehouse. The silver-haired man answered curtly, his voice carrying in the cavernous space. "Da, we have her. No, she hasn't said anything yet, but she will." A pause. "Understood. We'll make sure there's nothing left to find." Sarah's window was closing fast. She flipped 3 switches in quick succession, plunging 2/3 of the warehouse into darkness. Shouts erupted from the center of the space, followed by the rapid clicking of flashlights being activated. Moving fast, Sarah sprinted toward the chaos, Zeus at her heels. The remaining lights created a stark contrast between light and shadow, making it difficult for the guards to track movement in the darker areas. She was halfway to Elena when one of the guards spotted her. "There! Someone's here!" Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. Sarah dove behind a forklift as bullets pinged off metal around her. Zeus yelped and scrambled for cover beside her. "Stay down, boy," she whispered, then returned fire with the .38. Her shot went wide, but it forced the guards to take cover, buying her precious seconds. In the distance, sirens wailed, getting closer. The feds were early, or her phone's clock was wrong. Either way, she was running out of time. Sarah took a deep breath, centering herself the way she'd learned during her darkest days with the angels. Sometimes survival meant embracing the violence you'd tried so hard to leave behind. She broke from cover, moving fast and low, using every trick she'd learned in a life she'd thought was buried forever. Elena's rescue depended on it. The warehouse erupted in chaos as federal agents poured through every entrance. Sarah pressed herself against the concrete pillar, clutching Maya's trembling form while Zeus stood guard beside them, his massive body coiled and ready. The sound of boots on metal echoed through the cavernous space, accompanied by shouted commands and the sharp crack of gunfire. Through the maze of machinery and shadows, Sarah caught glimpses of Marcus directing his remaining men, his face twisted with desperate rage. The careful web of corruption he'd spent years weaving was unraveling in real time, and she could see in his eyes that he'd rather burn it all down than surrender. This way, Agent Rodriguez materialized beside them, a weapon drawn but lowered. "We need to get you both to safety." Sarah helped Maya to her feet, the girl's face pale but determined. After everything she'd endured, Maya had found strength Sarah recognized, the same steel that had carried Sarah through her darkest moments. Zeus padded silently beside them as Rodriguez led them through the organized chaos toward a secure exit. Behind them, Marcus's voice cut through the din. "You think this ends anything? There are others, dozens of us embedded in the system. You'll never be safe." Sarah stopped walking. Something in his tone, the confidence beneath the desperation, made her blood run cold. She'd heard that same certainty before, in the voices of men who believed themselves untouchable because they'd corrupted everything around them. "Keep going," she told Rodriguez quietly, pushing Maya forward. "Get her out of here." "Sarah, no." Maya grabbed her arm. "Don't go back. I have to finish this." Sarah knelt down to meet Maya's eyes. "Some fights you can't walk away from, but this time I'm not fighting alone." She looked at Zeus, and the dog seemed to understand. He nuzzled Maya's hand once, then turned back to Sarah with those intelligent dark eyes that had started this whole journey. Together, they melted back into the shadows. The warehouse had become a battlefield of light and dark. Federal agents methodically clearing each section while Marcus's men made their desperate last stand. Sarah moved through the chaos with the predatory grace her old club brothers had taught her, Zeus a silent shadow at her side. She found Marcus cornered in the office section, 3 of his men forming a protective barrier while he frantically destroyed evidence on multiple computers. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who'd built his empire on secrets was now desperately trying to erase them. "It's over, Marcus," she called out, stepping into the open doorway. "Your network, your protection, all of it. Maya's testimony will expose everything." He looked up from the burning documents, his face a mask of cold fury. The girl's word against a decorated federal agent, please. "And you?" His laugh was bitter. "A biker with a record trying to play hero? Nobody will believe either of you." "Maybe not," Sarah admitted. "But they'll believe this." She held up her phone, the recording app clearly visible. Every word of his confession about the trafficking network, the corruption, his threats, all of it captured in digital clarity. Marcus's face went white as he realized the trap he'd walked into. The final confrontation was brief, but vicious. Marcus's men fought with the desperation of cornered animals, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. When the smoke cleared, Sarah found herself standing over Marcus's prone form as federal agents secured the scene. "You have no idea what you've done," he whispered through bloodied lips. "The people I answer to, they don't forgive, they don't forget. That girl will never be safe." Sarah crouched down beside him, her voice deadly quiet. "Then they'll have to go through me. And trust me, I've been preparing for that fight my whole life." 3 hours later, Sarah sat on the back bumper of an ambulance, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The warehouse buzzed with activity as evidence teams catalogued the massive bust. Maya had been taken to a secure facility for debriefing and protection, but not before promising Sarah they'd see each other again soon. Zeus lay at her feet, finally able to rest after months of protecting his young charge. The dog had earned his peace, just as Maya had earned her freedom. Agent Rodriguez approached with 2 cups of coffee and a folder thick with paperwork. "The recording you got sealed the case. Marcus is talking now, giving up names to cut a deal. Will roll up his entire network within the month." Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully. "And Maya? Witness protection, new identity, college scholarship. She'll have the life she deserves." Rodriguez paused. "We could offer you the same thing, fresh start, clean slate." Sarah looked out at the horizon where the sun was burning away the last shadows of night. For the first time in years, she could see clearly to tomorrow. She had choices now, real ones, and the strength to make them. "Thanks," she said quietly, "but I think I'm ready to stop running."